What if everything you believed about the silo was only half the truth? Episode 2 doesn't just continue the story, it completely changes the way we look at memory, control, and the people pulling the strings behind the scenes. While Juliet struggles to remember who she really is, another timeline begins revealing the terrifying secrets that may have started this entire nightmare hundreds of years earlier. Every conversation hides a clue, every decision raises a new question, and by the end of this episode, one thing becomes painfully clear. The greatest weapon inside the silo isn't technology, it's forgetting. Let's break down every major reveal, hidden detail, and shocking twist from Silo Season 3, Episode 2. Episode 2 wastes absolutely no time pulling us deeper into one of the biggest mysteries this series has ever introduced. Right from the beginning, we see that Juliet's biggest enemy is no longer the outside world. Instead, she's fighting something much more dangerous: her own mind. The memory treatment continues to erase pieces of who she really is, making every interaction feel strange and uncomfortable. She recognizes faces, but she doesn't understand the emotions connected to them. That creates a heartbreaking situation because the people around her remember everything, while she remembers almost nothing. This emotional imbalance becomes one of the strongest parts of the episode. At the same time, the episode introduces another timeline that slowly begins answering questions fans have been asking for years. Instead of giving us huge revelations all at once, the writers carefully place small clues throughout every conversation. Each scene feels normal on the surface, but hidden underneath is information that completely changes our understanding of the silo's history. One of the biggest themes throughout this episode is memory itself. The show asks a simple but powerful question. If someone removes your memories, are you still the same person? That question follows almost every character during this episode. The treatment being used isn't simply making people forget. It gives those in control the power to decide which memories should stay and which ones should disappear forever. That idea becomes even more disturbing when doctors explain that memories can eventually be rebuilt. At first, this sounds comforting because it suggests nothing is truly lost. But then we realize something terrifying. If someone else rebuilds your memories, they also decide which parts of your life deserve to exist. They can remove painful moments, erase mistakes, or even replace the truth with carefully designed lies. Suddenly, memory becomes another tool of control instead of something personal. This is exactly why the conversations between Daniel and the people running the treatment center become so important. Daniel wants only one thing: his sister back. He's desperate enough to believe the doctors because they speak with confidence and kindness. They never sound evil. Instead, they present every decision as something logical and necessary. That makes the situation far more unsettling because real control rarely looks like obvious villainy. It usually arrives wearing a friendly smile. Meanwhile, another important character refuses to accept those explanations without asking difficult questions. She challenges everything being said, forcing everyone to defend the treatment instead of simply accepting it. Through her investigation, the audience begins realizing that this technology may have a much darker history than anyone expected. The episode hints that memory manipulation wasn't created to help people recover from trauma alone. Instead, it may have been tested on vulnerable groups long before becoming publicly accepted. That revelation immediately changes how we view every organization connected to the project. Suddenly, the medical breakthrough starts looking more like a political weapon. Back inside the silo, Juliet's daily life becomes increasingly confusing. She receives flashes of memories that appear without warning. Sometimes they're triggered by familiar objects. Other times, they're caused by familiar voices. These moments are incredibly important because they suggest memories cannot be completely destroyed. Somewhere deep inside her mind, the truth is still fighting to survive. One of the smartest details in this episode is how ordinary objects become emotional triggers. Something as simple as a tool, a note, or an old helmet suddenly carries enormous meaning. The audience understands these objects because we've seen their history over previous seasons, but Juliet now looks at them almost like a stranger. Watching her slowly reconnect with those forgotten pieces creates constant emotional tension. The people closest to Juliet also struggle with impossible choices. Some want to remind her who she used to be. Others believe pushing too hard could make everything worse. Every conversation becomes awkward because nobody knows whether they should treat her like an old friend or someone they're meeting for the first time. That uncertainty makes every reunion surprisingly emotional without relying on dramatic speeches. The episode also quietly reminds us that Juliet has always trusted her instincts more than anyone else's advice. Even though her memories are disappearing, those instincts haven't completely vanished. Deep inside, something still feels wrong. She cannot explain why, but she knows certain stories don't sound true. That small spark of doubt may become the key to everything moving forward. As the first half of the episode continues, another hidden battle begins taking shape. While Juliet searches for pieces of herself, powerful figures inside the silo continue building a completely different plan. They're no longer focused on helping her recover. Their real priority is keeping the population calm, even if that means rewriting reality itself. Every new decision points toward one terrifying possibility: that the people in charge are preparing for something much bigger than one person's missing memories. By the end of this opening section, the mystery has become much larger than Juliet's personal journey. The episode transforms into a story about truth versus control, identity versus obedience, and whether memories belong to the people who lived them or the people powerful enough to erase them. That question hangs over every scene, creating suspense that only grows stronger as the episode moves toward its biggest revelations. As the episode moves forward, the mystery becomes even more intense, because Juliet slowly realizes that something inside her mind refuses to disappear. Every time she comes across a familiar place or object, tiny pieces of her past begin breaking through the walls built by the memory treatment. These moments may seem small, but they completely change the direction of the story. Instead of accepting that her memories are gone forever, the episode suggests they are still hidden somewhere deep inside her mind, waiting for the right trigger to bring them back. This creates one of the episode's most fascinating ideas. Maybe memories aren't actually destroyed at all. Maybe they're simply buried beneath another story that someone else has written. If that's true, then every person who undergoes this treatment isn't becoming someone new. They're living inside a carefully controlled version of themselves. That possibility becomes even more frightening when we return to the people monitoring Juliet's progress. They aren't simply checking her health. They're measuring how well the new version of reality is replacing the old one. Every forgotten memory is treated like progress, while every flashback is seen as a dangerous setback. It quickly becomes obvious that Juliet isn't recovering from anything. She's participating in an experiment designed to rewrite her entire identity. One detail that deserves attention is how calm everyone in charge appears. Nobody is shouting orders or acting like a traditional villain. Instead, every conversation is polite, professional, and filled with reassuring words. That makes everything even more disturbing because manipulation often works best when it feels reasonable. They genuinely believe they're protecting society, even if it means taking away the very thing that makes someone who they are. The episode also begins exploring another important question. What happens when an entire society is built on forgotten history? We already know that the people inside the silo have limited knowledge about the past, but episode 2 suggests that this wasn't an accident. It may have been carefully designed from the very beginning. As the investigation continues in the second timeline, Daniel finds himself pulled deeper into a mystery much bigger than his sister's condition. Every answer he receives creates two new questions. The officials insist the treatment exists to help people recover from unbearable trauma, but other evidence points toward a much darker purpose. Reports, conversations, and hidden details suggest that this technology has existed far longer than anyone admits. The episode cleverly avoids giving us complete answers. Instead, it leaves breadcrumbs for viewers to follow. We hear about previous experiments, secret programs, and questionable decisions that slowly paint a picture of an organization willing to sacrifice truth in exchange for stability. Their logic is surprisingly simple. If people don't remember painful events, they won't rebel against them. That philosophy immediately connects back to everything we've learned about the silo over the previous seasons. Every rebellion, every missing document, every forbidden relic, and every erased piece of history suddenly feels connected. Instead of isolated mysteries, they begin looking like parts of one enormous plan. Meanwhile, Juliet continues meeting people who clearly mean something to her, even if she can't remember why. These scenes are emotionally powerful because the audience understands the relationships while Juliet experiences them as complete strangers. Every conversation becomes uncomfortable in the best possible way. The people around her desperately hope she'll remember them, while she struggles to understand why everyone expects an emotional connection she simply doesn't feel. Walker plays an especially important role during this part of the episode. Rather than forcing memories onto Juliet, Walker quietly encourages her to trust her instincts. It's a subtle but meaningful difference. Instead of saying, "Remember who you were," Walker is really asking, "Listen to the part of yourself that hasn't disappeared." That advice becomes increasingly important because Juliet begins noticing small inconsistencies in the stories she's being told. Certain explanations don't feel right. Some details don't fit together. She can't explain why, but her instincts continue telling her that someone is hiding the truth. Another fascinating moment arrives when familiar objects trigger unexpected emotional reactions. The multi-tool, the helmet, and other relics aren't valuable because of what they are. They're valuable because they connect directly to experiences that the treatment failed to erase completely. The episode seems to suggest that emotions are much harder to remove than facts. Even when Juliet forgets specific events, the feelings connected to them continue existing beneath the surface. This emotional memory becomes one of the episode's strongest themes. It reminds us that identity isn't built only from information. It's built from experiences, relationships, fears, and instincts. Those things can't simply be deleted with a pill. They continue influencing decisions even when the conscious mind no longer understands why. At the same time, trouble begins growing elsewhere inside the silo. The people working behind the scenes are becoming increasingly nervous because Juliet isn't responding the way they expected. Every recovered memory represents another crack in their carefully controlled system. They realize that if Juliet remembers everything, she could expose secrets capable of shaking the entire foundation of the silo. This fear pushes the leadership toward even more dangerous decisions. Instead of questioning whether the treatment should continue, they double down on controlling the situation. Their confidence starts turning into desperation, and that's where the episode quietly raises the stakes. The conflict is no longer just about one woman remembering her past. It's about whether the truth itself can survive in a society built on carefully managed lies. Perhaps the most interesting revelation comes from hints about previous resets. Without explaining everything directly, the episode strongly implies that what is happening to Juliet may have happened before. Entire generations may have forgotten history, accepted new stories, and continued living without ever realizing their memories had been altered. That possibility completely changes the way we view the silo. It isn't just a shelter anymore. It may also be a machine designed to rewrite civilization whenever those in power decide it's necessary. By the end of this section, the tension reaches another level. Juliet's memories are becoming stronger. Daniel is uncovering dangerous secrets from the past, and the people controlling both timelines are starting to lose their grip. Every clue points toward one unavoidable conclusion. The truth has survived far longer than anyone expected, and once enough people begin remembering, no amount of control may be able to stop what comes next. As episode 2 approaches its final act, every storyline begins moving toward the same frightening conclusion. The biggest mystery is no longer whether people are lying. The real question is how long those lies have shaped the world inside the silo. What started as a personal struggle over Juliet's lost memories slowly transforms into a much larger battle over truth itself. Every character now stands at a crossroads, whether they realize it or not. Juliet's determination becomes the emotional center of the episode. Even though she can't fully explain what's happening inside her mind, she refuses to ignore the strange feelings pulling her toward forgotten pieces of her past. Every flash of memory becomes stronger than the last. Instead of accepting the carefully constructed reality placed in front of her, she begins questioning everything. The people around her notice the change immediately. They're no longer watching someone who is peacefully recovering. They're watching someone waking up. One of the smartest choices the writers make is showing that memories don't return all at once. They arrive in tiny fragments, forcing both Juliet and the audience to connect the pieces together. A familiar hallway, a meaningful conversation, an old tool, or a helmet can suddenly unlock emotions that refuse to stay buried. Those moments remind us that the human mind is far more powerful than the system trying to control it. At the same time, the leadership inside the silo becomes increasingly nervous. Every report they receive suggests that the treatment isn't working as planned. Juliet continues asking questions she shouldn't be asking. She notices details she shouldn't notice. More importantly,